When did karma destroy your ex? So perfectly, you didn't need revenge. Story 1. I used to call Lena a startup in heels. She called me steady, which sounded sweet until I learned it meant useful credit score. She convinced me to co-sign her coaching business lease, then accidentally left her DMs open one night. Half flirty clients, half, babe, he'll never notice the invoice padding. I noticed. I canceled my card, paid my half of the buyout, and went ghost. No revenge plan, just drywalling my piece back together. Months later, her brand exploded on social media. Hustle but make it healing. She snagged a keynote at our city's big Women in Business Summit. Giant stage, smoke machines, the works. I was there only because my friend was bartending and offered me a pass. Lena strode out in a white suit to talk about integrity, and the Jumbotron flickered. The slides jumped from vision to a Google Doc titled Testimonials Draft from Other Sites. Then another window, a spreadsheet mapping client vulnerability triggers. Then a photo grid of other coaches' quotes, copy-pasted. The audience made that low, confused murmur that means a ship is turning. Lena stared off stage, smile shaking. Security jogged to the AV booth. The moderator tried to stall. And then a volunteer, tiny, buzz cut, wearing a badge that said tech intern, stepped up to the mic and said calmly, "This is my formal complaint." She explained she'd worked part-time for Lena, was promised college recommendation letters in exchange for content curation, which turned out to be scraping and rewording. When she refused, Lena paid her late and called her replaceable. So the intern emailed the files to the summit's ethics committee, who cued them as a teach-by-negative example and timed it to Lena's slot. By the time Lena's fiancé, a crypto guy with a jaw like a shovel, reached the stage, the sponsors had already pulled logos off the banner. Her PR person tried to wrangle cameras. The moderator thanked the intern. The audience applauded integrity so hard, my chest stung. I didn't post a single word. I didn't need to. I helped my friend stack glassware while security escorted Lena down the aisle. She passed me without looking, eyes locked on a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Over the exit, the Jumbotron froze on one last slide. Her brand promise in bold, borrow nothing, build everything. The crowd laughed, then went quiet. Karma didn't just catch her, it handed her own slogan back like a mirror. Story 2. I'm 15 now, but when I was 9, my mom, Dad's ex, taught me to hate him. She coached lines like scripts. He's unstable. He ignores you. He's scary when he's quiet. I wrote them in a pink notebook with stickers. In court, I read from that notebook. Dad cried silently and mouthed, "It's okay." It didn't feel okay. After the hearing, Mom would blast triumphant playlists and say we were reclaiming our story. She moved in with her boyfriend, Troy, who smelled like gasoline and cologne, and laughed whenever I mentioned homework. He would take my phone to check your screen time and DM people from my accounts. When I complained, Mom said I was projecting my father's control issues. Everything unraveled on parent night at school. Our tech teacher flagged suspicious activity on student accounts, memes posted from the same IP as threats sent to 2 boys who'd teased me. The principal called the police because one message included a photo of a pellet gun on a couch I recognized. Our couch. When they traced the IP, it was our router. When they knocked, Troy said someone hacked the neighborhood Wi-Fi, but the pellet gun photo had EXIF data on it. Thank you, Miss Patel, for that lesson. It tagged our living room and a timestamp from a night Troy said he was out with the guys. The cops asked for devices. Troy panicked, then asked Mom if he could borrow her laptop. She handed it over with shaking hands. In court, the same judge from when I was 9 looked older and tired. My dad looked the same. Quiet, hands folded, eyes on me when I walked in. Mom's lawyer tried the misunderstood teenager angle until the digital forensics guy pulled up my notebook scans, emailed from Mom's account to her sister with the subject line, "What she should say." Even the stickers were visible on the edges. When the judge asked if I wanted to say anything, I said yes. I said the notebook wasn't my words. I said I missed reading in silence at Dad's place, where the loudest thing is the fish tank. The judge awarded primary custody to Dad that day. He didn't smile. He just handed me a pack of gummy bears he'd kept in his pocket for months. Melted into one giant bear. On the way out, Mom called after me using my baby nickname. I stopped. The bailiff held the door. I turned and said, "Please don't text from my accounts anymore." Her face twisted like she'd bite through a lemon. Karma didn't punish her with sirens or headlines. It handed me my voice and made her hear it in a quiet room. Story 3. My ex, Aaron, worked at our hospital's HR department and loved the power of knowing where everyone's skeletons were filed. He left me for a nurse influencer. Scrubs, lashes, giveaway rings. After telling me I didn't understand ambition, fine. I understood overtime and rent and keeping my head down at the nurse's station. Their engagement party was held in the hospital's conference center because they wanted a full-circle vibe. I was on shift but got roped into tending the coffee table since the caterer's assistant called in sick. I kept my head down, refilled carafes, and watched pastel balloons tremble under AC vents. Aaron grabbed the mic to thank his rock, and to joke about workplace romance policies he definitely never broke. Laughter. Then the projector came on. Slideshow of their couple photos set to a song I used to love before it turned to static in my ears. Photo, 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 and then an email. Not a picture of an email. An email. The header showed our hospital domain. Subject, candidate. Favor, from Aaron. The body asked another manager to lose an application from a nurse who'd reported his fiancé for medication miscounts. The room inhaled at the same time. He fumbled the remote. Another email appeared. Schedule tweak to keep M off Unit 3 while audit wraps. Then a third. Reminder. HR doesn't do love letters. Delete the drafts. The last one included a screenshot of a draft. A breakup message addressed to me from months earlier. Time-stamped during a night he said he was sleeping at the on-call room. You know who cued it? His fiancé's cousin, 17. She'd been ghosted for babysitting money and found the emails on a shared iPad when Aaron logged into Outlook to check a policy. She sent them to the compliance officer with a note. If I'm wrong, sorry. If I'm right, please stop him. Compliance didn't stop the party. They attended it. The officer stepped forward, calm as a winter morning, and announced an immediate suspension pending investigation. Aaron tried to spin, tried to joke, tried to propose anyway. The ring box popped open and clattered to the floor. His fiancé's jaw set like a door slamming softly. She didn't cry. She handed the mic to the compliance officer and said, "Thank you for coming." I didn't speak to him. I poured coffee. When security asked for his badge, he looked around for someone to defend him and found only balloon strings and sugar packets. Somewhere in the back, the espresso machine hissed, and the sound covered the moment his ring skated across tile. Karma wore a name badge and carried a policy binder, and I just refilled mugs. Story 4. My grandmother kept a porcelain angel on a shelf that my ex Mateo said was creepy. He also said my cousin Isa was like a sister to him. You can see where this is going. When I found tangled earrings under his passenger seat, I knew exactly whose handwriting left earring would be in if there were a note. There wasn't, just lies about rides home and family closeness. I left the apartment key on the kitchen table and moved into Grandma's spare room. The family divided neatly. People who believed boys will be boys, and people who brought me soup. Mateo and Isa still showed up at Sunday dinners like they were auditioning for sainthood. I learned to breathe through it. When Grandma passed, the church was packed. After the final hymn, our lawyer asked us to stay for a brief reading of the will. Per her instructions, he wheeled out a TV on one of those old AV carts. The porcelain angel sat on top like a crown. On the screen, Grandma smiled in a dated blouse. "Hi, you nosy angels," she said. Half the room laughed. She said love was not a theory. It was a schedule. It was who showed up. Then she said we would watch footage from her front hall because old ladies can install cameras too. The video showed date stamps, hugs, coats draped on chairs. It also showed Mateo arriving at odd hours when I wasn't home. Isa floating in behind him, both whispering and straightening hair in the mirror. My aunt gasped. My uncle swore softly into a tissue. Grandma narrated, voice steady. "If you are watching this, I am beyond caring who gets mad. I am not beyond protecting who stayed when the lights were on. The will left me the house. It left Isa a small sum earmarked for a new start somewhere she can learn what loyalty means. Mateo received a book, Grandma's Devotionals, with a sticky note, return borrowed things. Inside the book was the key I'd left on his table. Isa stormed out. Mateo followed, then turned back to say nothing. He saw all the faces, all the casseroles, realized the votes were counted, and lowered his eyes. I didn't need to raise my voice or list every betrayal. The room had already decided. The angel figurine gleamed on the cart like a tiny CCTV witness. At the burial, the wind flipped the page of the service pamphlet to the line Grandma had underlined herself. Love rejoices with the truth. I tucked the key back into the book and felt, for the first time in months, like my house wanted me to come home. Story 5. I'll own my part first. I dated Tom way too long because he knew how to make every failure sound like a misunderstanding. When he lost rent money, a glitch. When he found Venmo messages to his ex, a prank. The last straw was when he told my friends I'd stolen from his business and he had proof. He filed a small claims case because he wanted accountability. I lawyered up with a legal aid clinic. I brought a folder. He brought swagger and a leather portfolio that probably contained air. The courtroom was fluorescent and bored. The judge looked like he'd read every lie already this week. Tom explained that I'd taken cash from his register while helping at pop-ups, and that in retaliation I'd slandered him. His word. Online. The judge asked for evidence. Tom slid printouts of my group texts where I'd warned friends not to front him money. He smirked like a magician. "Show me the register records," the judge said. Tom flipped through his portfolio and produced screenshots of a notes app. The judge raised an eyebrow so high it needed oxygen. My legal aid attorney asked permission to submit bank statements from the Pop-Ups Square account. Tom had accidentally added me as an admin months ago and forgot to remove me. The deposits flowed to his personal checking. On 3 dates he'd claimed I stole. There were cash withdrawals at a casino ATM within 20 minutes of closing. Then came the real twist. The bailiff's phone pinged, and he asked to approach the bench. The judge frowned, read something, then called a 5-minute recess. When we returned, the judge asked Tom if his iCloud email was still tied to his old iPad. He said yes. The judge turned the screen so we all could see. An email forwarded from Mom to the court's general inbox. Address printed on the public website. It contained Tom's messages to a buddy. "If she pays me back, I'll drop it. If not, I'll scare her with court. Judge won't check ATM pulls, LOL." His mother had taken the iPad back for her grandkid and found the messages while setting up games. Her subject line: "This is wrong." Tom deflated like a balloon, slowly letting air out while trying to act tough about it. The judge dismissed the case and referred the file to the DA for potential fraud. He looked at me and asked if I wished to pursue anything further. I said no. I wanted my Thursday back. Outside, Tom mumbled something about misunderstanding. I told him to thank his mother for choosing honesty over enabling. He laughed like it was a joke until his phone lit up with her name. Karma didn't hit him with a car or a scandal. It dialed in on speaker. I walked to the bus stop, lighter by one lawsuit, and an entire future I didn't need to fix. Story 6. I wasn't a guest at my ex's wedding. I was the DJ who got booked by the venue after her planner bailed. I almost said no, but money's money, and I figured I'd keep my head down behind speakers and lights. My ex, Raven, had left me with a smug, "You're a guy who plays other people's hits. I'm the woman who writes her own." Translation: she'd met a startup founder and wanted a shinier audience. They planned an immersive vow experience, hidden mics, cinematic lighting, the whole Pinterest apocalypse. I ran cables and tested the lapel mics with the officiant. Hot mic on channel B, bride on C, groom on D. 20 minutes before ceremony, Raven's maid of honor marched over insisting I boost the romance. She shoved me a cue plan with timestamps down to the second. Raven never trusted a moment to just be. The processional swelled. Groom looked starstruck, the kind way. Raven reached the arbor in a dress that caught the light like a threat. The officiant opened with the usual, then invited them to share private vows, off mic. Except Channel C was still live in the board. I caught it first, my stomach dropping. Through the mains, soft as gossip, came Raven's whisper. "Relax, babe. The Bali account is just my safety. The prenup doesn't touch what he doesn't know about." The front row froze. The groom's father leaned forward like he'd misheard. The officiant blinked. I killed C as fast as a slap, but the sentence hung in the air like perfume that won't fade. Whisper turned to thunder in silence. The groom spoke without looking away from Raven. "What Bali account?" She laughed tiny. Stage laugh. The one she used to test an echo in a room. "You're being dramatic." The groom turned to the officiant. Pause, then to the balcony. Maya, a woman in a navy suit, stood. Lawyer. The groom had come prepared in a way I didn't recognize until he nodded at me. "Can you play something?" I hit the softest instrumental I owned. A piano piece that folds a room in half. Maya approached with a folder. "There's a clause," she said evenly. "Full financial disclosure prior to the ceremony, or this event becomes a rehearsal only." She set a printout on the arbor shelf. Raven reached for it. The groom's hand got there first. His face changed from stunned to certain. "We're done here," he said. Not unkind, just finally awake. People think karma is sirens. Sometimes it's 130 guests taking 3 quiet steps back to give a man a path to the exit. I faded the music as the groom walked down the aisle alone, passing my booth with a nod that said, "Thanks for the truth I hadn't meant to broadcast." Raven tried to summon tears. Nothing arrived. Later, while packing cables, I found the maid of honor in a hallway, shaking. "She told me to tell you to boost the romance," she said. I think she meant the volume. I didn't send the invoice with a snarky note. I just attached a clean MP3 of a piano track and titled it Fresh Start. She'll hear it someday and remember what the room chose. Story 7. A month after Mara dumped me because she needed a partner with vision, the city's grid went down in a July heatwave. Her boutique's soft open was that night. Champagne, influencers, a neon sign that said, "Fate loves the fearless." The power cut at 7:12 p.m., And fate loved no one. I was 2 blocks away, hauling fans out of a community center with my dad. He's an electrician who still writes notes in a pocket spiral, the kind of man Mara called non-scalable labor. We were wiring the center to a rented generator when a panicked event planner sprinted up. Please, card readers are dead. AC is dead. The clothes will warp from humidity. Do either of you? She recognized me then. Her mouth tugged like a zipper. Oh. Dad asked 3 questions, none petty. Amperage needed? Breaker access? Roof clearance? Within 10 minutes, he had a plan. We'll move one of our Jennies after the community center is safe, he said. We finished there, then rolled the second generator down the block like a stubborn animal. Mara's investors were fanning themselves with lookbooks. The neon sign lay dark like a dare. Dad traced a path, flipped 2 breakers, and told me to run extension snakes like arteries. 15 minutes later, the boutique glowed again. Card readers blinked alive. Champagne poured. Influencers unclenched. Mara appeared, glittering and furious, and then paused when she saw Dad's spiral notebook clipped to his shirt. I know you, she said to him, not to me. You're the dad. I'm a lot of people's dad, he said. Tonight I'm your electrician. He walked the space with her planner, pointed at fire hazards, gently explained the science of not burning dreams down. The investors cornered me near the stockroom. You coordinated this? One asked. I shrugged. He did. But they're the kind of men who hear competence like a stock tip. We're looking for reliable facilities partners for our portfolio, another said. Your dad have a company? 3 weeks later, Mara's lease fell through. Landlord discovered she'd borrowed electrical work without permits before the blackout and wouldn't renew. Meanwhile, Dad and I signed 3 contracts retrofitting buildings those investors owned to code. At the first site, we found the boutique's neon sign abandoned in a storage bay. I asked the foreman what he wanted to do with it. He said, scrap it. Dad said, hold on. We hung it in the shop we opened together, the one with our name on the glass and a counter my niece painted. We wired the sign to a breaker labeled with a sticky note, humility, 20 amps. It flickers sometimes in summer, just enough to look like it's breathing. The day we cut the ribbon, Mara walked by, sunglasses on even in shade. She didn't come in. She stared at the sign until a customer opened the door and let the sound of our register, steady and real, roll out to the sidewalk. Karma didn't clap. It clocked in. It told a room full of vision that the guy with the spiral keeps the lights on, and people invest in what actually works. Story 8. I'm the X. We don't usually write these, but if karma ever shook my shoulder, it was at my dissertation defense with 3 professors, 2 grad students, and the woman I cheated on, Lydia, watching from the back row because I'd invited her out of some cocktail of guilt and arrogance. I told myself I wanted closure. I wanted an audience. My research was on algorithmic fairness in loan approvals. Lydia is a software engineer who taught me how to use version control when I was still naming files final2.docx. When I left her, I told myself I needed someone more present. Truth, I wanted applause on demand, and Lydia took time to think before she clapped. I opened with a line I'd practiced. Bias lives in the defaults we don't interrogate. The committee nodded. I walked through my models. Slide 18 was the pivot. My contribution, a clever optimization that handled missing data without amplifying bias. I clicked. The code appeared. The room stilled in a way that wasn't admiration. The methods chair raised a hand. Can you scroll up? I scrolled. A comment in the code that I had not written sat there like a fossil in fresh clay. Lydia's approach. Better than mine, LOL. The commit author showed my username, but the timestamp linked to a Git history merge that pulled from a private repo. The chair asked me to open the repository URL in the corner. I did. Permission denied. He looked at Lydia. Would you mind granting temporary read? She didn't meet my eyes. Sure. She typed a few keys on her laptop and nodded. The screen filled with the history I'd tried to flatten. Message after message, refactor per Lydia's notes. Fix edge case, Lydia spotted. And there, 6 months earlier, a commit from my new girlfriend's account. Copy Lydia's impute for demo. The chair didn't yell. He just breathed out through his nose like a kettle about to settle. Did Lydia consent to being a co-author? He asked. I said words and none of them were true. Lydia spoke once. I told him to do the right thing when it was easy. She closed her laptop. They suspended the defense. I didn't lose my degree. I lost the story I'd been telling about who had made the work real. The committee required a full rewrite with Lydia as first author on the method. She declined authorship, emailed the department a 1-sentence note. I don't co-author with people who cheat on and off the page. She released her approach open source under a license that required attribution forever. 6 months later, a bank adopted her implementation and put her name in a press release. I signed a correction to my dissertation that listed her in the acknowledgments with the line she wrote herself. For teaching me to interrogate my defaults, my advisor insisted it stay in my voice. He wanted me to feel it every time I saw my own bound book. Karma didn't take my degree. It took my ability to pretend I'd earned it alone. Every time a recruiter asks about my thesis, I tell them the truth up front. It's the only way doors open now, and the only apology that isn't an alibi. Story 9. My mother's ex, my ex-stepdad, I guess, used to tell everyone he'd rescued us after my dad died. He said Mom couldn't manage money, that I was ungrateful, that we needed his leadership. Leadership looked like siphoned college savings and lectures about earning your keep if I wanted food that wasn't rice. When I got a full scholarship, he called it a fluke of diversity math. At my dorm's move-in barbecue, he showed up uninvited in a polo with his company logo and announced he'd negotiated an internship for me if I kept my attitude in check. My mom winced but didn't contradict him. I didn't either. Karma needs an audience, and sometimes you have to let the curtains rise. 2 months into the semester, his company sponsored Family Weekend. They rented the quad, put up a stage, and planned an on-site demo of their new app, a budget tool that teaches fiscal discipline. He loved stages the way toddlers love mirrors. He insisted we sit front row. The CEO handed him the mic to walk through a mock family budget. He plugged in numbers and hit sync. The app pulled live feeds from connected accounts to show how it worked, what no one told him. The devs had pushed a new build that grabbed any authenticated accounts left open on the presentation iPad. He'd logged into his business account earlier to check a vendor payment. The app populated categories with his real transactions. The big screen behind him broke every lie in his voice. Personal transfers, $4,500, marked Sawyer Tuition Fund. Casino, $3,000. Jewelry, $1,800. Apartment rent, $2,200. Recipient M. Delgado. My mom stood so fast her chair toppled. The crowd thought it was part of the show until she climbed the stage steps calm as a storm. "Is this the leadership?" she asked, looking not at him but at the CEO. The CEO looked like he'd swallowed a fork. The PR woman hovered, white-faced, mouthing no. A dev in a hoodie sprinted to cut the feed. Too late, phones were out. Parents were whispering. My scholarship advisor, who'd come just to finally meet my supportive step-parent, put a hand on my shoulder. "Sawyer," she said, "are you safe?" I nodded. The CEO took the mic back like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "We'll issue a statement," he said. My stepdad tried to laugh. "Demo data, you know how it is." But the app's audit log kept scrolling. Outgoing, $600. Earpods, X3, Venmo. Thanks for last night. I could feel the quad recalibrate. People who had believed his voice now believed the numbers. Security walked him off the stage, not for the spending, but for trying to yank cables. The CEO apologized to my mom before the evening was even over. Monday morning, the company announced a values review. By Wednesday, my stepdad's profile was gone from the website. On Friday, a lawyer from my dad's estate emailed us. The withdrawals from my college fund were actionable after all under the trust's clawback clause. Karma didn't scream. It balanced a ledger on a jumbotron, then handed my mom a pen. She signed the papers with a hand that finally didn't shake. Story 10. When Esme left, she said I was too cautious, and that love should feel like cliff diving. 6 weeks later, she posted a ring selfie with a touring guitarist whose stage name sounded like a protein shake. I muted everything and went back to teaching 9th graders how to annotate poems without killing them. The guitarist's label ran a summer radio contest. Write a hook, win studio time, and premiere live during a drive time broadcast. Esme bragged that she'd helped write his new single. I listened once, purely to know what I was bracing against. The hook slithered out of my car speakers and my hands went cold. It was mine. Not the chords, those are free as clouds, but the weird little internal rhyme I'd written months before for Esme's birthday, recorded on my phone, sent to her in a voice memo when she said she missed old-school romance. She'd replied with a heart reaction and then never spoke of it again. I emailed the station, polite as a librarian. I had a time-stamped memo with a distinctive lyric. They replied with boilerplate about independent creation. I let it go. Karma prefers live mics anyway. Contest day. The station set up in the city plaza with folding chairs and a stage made of optimism. The guitarist swaggered out in a hat large enough to shade a picnic. Esme followed, a cordless mic glittering in her hand. "We love our fans," she cooed. "We'll now take one lucky caller to sing along." The producer pointed at a teenager in a denim jacket who looked like she'd swallowed a star. "Dial in and we'll patch you," he said. The kid dialed. Nothing happened. The producer frowned. The studio line was already open. A tinny voice came through the PA. Test, test. Are we on?" It was the station's legal counsel, confused and earnest. We received a DMCA counter notice with metadata and a notarized affidavit from a high school teacher. Also, the original voice memo's waveform matches the published track's hook, including a distinctive throat, clear at 007. They'd connected the wrong O, and the lawyer was talking to the whole plaza. The guitarist tried to vamp. Esme laughed like static. The counsel sighed audibly. Due to risk exposure, we are suspending the premiere and the contest. To the teacher, if you're present, please see us at the tent. I walked to the tent not because I wanted revenge, but because my ninth graders would ask what happened, and I wanted to be able to tell them I finished the poem. The label rep met me with a handshake stiff as drywall. We can settle, he said. I said I was a teacher. Time was my wealth. Then let's give the time to someone else, he muttered, and turned to the denim jacket kid. How about studio hours for you? On stage, the guitarist tried to propose to Esme to salvage the moment. The crowd, suddenly very sober, watched him drop to one knee and then fumble the ring. It rolled to the edge of the stage and pinged down into a storm drain with a sound so comic and final, people couldn't help it. They laughed, then caught themselves, then laughed again. I didn't post a triumph thread. I went home and graded poems where kids tried to say the right thing about rivers. In one margin I wrote, "You don't have to push anyone. The current moves." Esme texted a single, "Can we talk?" that I didn't answer. Not out of spite. Out of relief. Karma had already written the bridge, and for once I didn't need the last verse. Story 11. When Claudia left me for the guy in 14B, she said she was done dating men who never win. Then 14B got elected HOA president and started writing violation letters like poetry. He fined a wheelchair user for a non-conforming ramp, threatened to tow holiday lights, and posted ring camera clips of unsightly behavior, mine, when I hauled compost at 6 a.m. Claudia loved the proximity to power. She'd wave from their balcony like a cruise director. The storm came in October, wind like a train, rain hammering the gutters. Power died at 2:11 a.m. Everyone followed the emergency plan. Everyone except 14B, who'd banned generators on balconies as visual clutter. At 3:04 a.m., the wheelchair user's caregiver pounded on doors. The ramp panel had blown off and jammed beneath 14B's new truck. We went out with headlamps and bungee cords. Claudia watched from the stairwell in a robe, filming. Then the man in the hoodie stepped out of the dark and showed a badge. He wasn't a resident. He was the city's ADA compliance investigator, here because of anonymous complaints and a notice 14B never posted. He'd scheduled a 7 a.m. inspection. The storm moved the appointment up to right now. Is the HOA president on site? He asked. 14B strode out with a flashlight and a speech about personal responsibility. The investigator listened, then pointed at the ramp. You denied a variance, installed landscaping that narrows egress, and parked a vehicle within the approach. During a declared weather emergency, he angled his light at Claudia's phone, and you recorded tenants' movements for an unauthorized social media account. Claudia lowered the phone like it burned. 14B tried to pivot to community spirit. The investigator unfolded papers, emergency orders, fines assessed by the minute, a temporary trustee appointed on the spot to handle safety remediation until a recall vote. The trustee looked around and said, "Who knows where the breaker maps are?" Everyone pointed at me. I'd done maintenance work for years because I liked things that worked. While I led the investigator to the mechanical room, Claudia whispered to 14B, "Fix this," as if it were a caption. In the room, the investigator took notes, eyes on the panels, not me. You logged the generator objection, he asked. I nodded. And the ramp variance? I showed the emails 14B had ignored. He snapped photos. Thank you. At dawn, soaked and shivering, I watched the community roll itself back from danger. Neighbors carrying plywood, teenagers holding flashlights like torches, the caregivers sobbing with relief as we reseated the ramp. The recall petitions filled 3 clipboard pages by noon. Claudia didn't wave anymore. She carried boxes to her car and left before the vote. The last thing I saw of 14B was his truck, silent and legal for once, with a bright orange notice under the wiper. Karma didn't play a siren. It read a statute in the rain and made the neighborhood listen. Claudia said she wanted a man who wins. Turned out, the winners are the ones who keep the lights on and the ramp clear. Story 12. Vince called himself a chefpreneur, which is a long way of saying he ran pop-up dinners out of borrowed kitchens and treated recipes like scavenger hunts. He left me with a speech about how I lacked palate courage and posted a boomerang of him tossing salt like he'd invented sodium. I stayed at my line cook job and paid rent in tips and burns. A year later, he opened a brick and mortar with hedge fund money and a neon sign that said, Salty Saint. Influencers lined up around the block. I avoided the street until my cousin texted, Get to the alley now. She works at the health department. She doesn't send texts like that. When I got there, a teenager in a beanie, some food vlogger with 2 million followers, was live streaming from the sidewalk because Vince had comped him a tasting menu. And then, in the kitchen tour segment, told a prep cook to just rinse the chicken if it touches the floor. The Beanie Kids chat exploded. "That's not a thing," someone typed. The kid said, "That's not a thing," on camera. Comments tagged my cousin's department account. The algorithm did the rest. 2 inspectors arrived with clipboards and the exact smile that says, "This isn't personal. It's Tuesday." Vince tried to charm them into rescheduling. They pointed at the prep sink stacked with greens and raw chicken like a diorama of cross-contamination. They swabbed cutting boards that bled invisible fluorescence under their penlight. They asked for his HACCP plan. Vince handed over a mood board. The inspector lifted a lid. Inside, a 5-gallon bucket of aioli, warm as bathwater. "When was this made?" she asked. "This afternoon," the Sioux offered. Vince said, "Flavor needs time to bloom." The inspector said, "So does bacteria." She shut the lid and tagged it. Meanwhile, the Beanie Kids Live had tilted from hype to horror. Viewers identified an unapproved storage closet Vince called the Char Room, otherwise known as a mopped once-a-week nook-sharing space with pest traps. A rat trap snapped on cue like a punchline. The chat sponsored 3 separate "Please Stop" super chats. Vince kept smiling like the camera owed him a favor. When the inspectors posted a temporary closure notice, Vince ranted about small minds. His investors weren't small. They were standing behind him, reading the chat, watching the number climb over 100,000 live viewers. One of them leaned into frame and said very calmly, "We're done." You could hear 1,000 forks clatter down in that silence, all over the city. I didn't need to say a word. The vlogger DM'd me later. "You want to help me make a series about how to actually run a safe kitchen?" We filmed at my job on our day off. Hairnets and all. It wasn't viral. It was useful. Salty Saint reopened months later with a new name, new chef, and a wall where the neon used to be. Vince went private on everything. My cousin sent me a photo of the inspection score at my place. 100. It looked like a sunrise. Story 13. Lyle left me for a startup with a logo that looked like a cryptocurrency sneezing. "Logistics is dead weight," he said, packing his desk cactus into a box like a victory. I stayed at the warehouse and kept doing what logistics does, making things arrive where people need them, which is the closest thing to magic we allow ourselves. 18 months later, after the startup imploded on a Tuesday like a tent in a gust, a resume came through our portal, his. He'd applied for a floor supervisor position with a cover letter about operational excellence. HR flagged me as the hiring manager. I took a walk around the racks just to laugh where only forklifts could hear. I scheduled his interview anyway. Not for revenge, for verification. He wore the suit he bought with his signing bonus, shoulders already sagging out of it. He shook my hand like we'd bumped into each other at brunch. "No hard feelings," he tried. "What a journey," I said. We did the questions. He said leverage, a lot. He avoided details like they owed him money. I asked how he'd handle a lithium battery spill. He changed the subject to culture. I asked about OSHA. He said we could move fast and tape later. Our safety lead, Priya, slid me a tablet mid-interview. "You should see this," she whispered. On the screen, a video Lyle had posted during his crypto crusade, riding a warehouse conveyor belt like a carnival attraction, captioned, "We disrupt everything." Comments. Legend. Bro is the vibe. This is actually illegal? He'd filmed it at a partner facility. He'd tagged our company by name when bragging about poaching talent. I thanked him for coming and walked him to the bay. That's when he saw the poster we'd hung since he left. A collage of near-miss reports that became safer protocols. His old team's signatures circled hazards like constellations. "We changed a lot after you left," I said, and meant we healed. The next morning, our HR director emailed a sentence so clean it polished the week. "We cannot move forward due to concerns regarding safety culture and judgment." Lyle replied with a paragraph about forgiveness and innovation. HR replied with a screenshot of his conveyor joyride and a link to our safety pledge, which he'd signed and broken. They CC'd me to close the loop. Weeks later, a new hire named Anna stopped by my office. "I turned down the startup life," she said, "because my little brother uses his insulin pump like it's nothing. Because it arrives on time. I wanted to work where things arrive." I pointed at the map on the wall with all our routes stitched like veins. "This is where they do." Karma didn't clap back on Instagram. It stamped a resume, no, then handed that open seat to someone who treats a conveyor like a lifeline, not a toy. Story 14. I used to joke that my ex, Corey, loved my cat more than me. When we split, she forgot to return him after a weekend. "He's happier here," she said, sending photos of my orange lump sleeping in sun puddles. I didn't go nuclear because I didn't want a custody battle over a creature who hated car rides. I told myself cats pick their people. Spring brought the rescue fair. Vaccines, adoptions, microchip checks, bounce house. I volunteered at the intake tent because I owed the rescue for introducing me to my cat in the first place. Midday, a familiar yowl vibrated the aluminum poles. I turned and nearly dropped the clipboard. Corey walked in holding him like a trophy. He stared at me the way cats stare at the person who knows where the good treats are hidden. "We're here for a nail trim," she told the volunteer. "And to update his chip to my address." "Perfect," the volunteer said. She scanned him. Her scanner beeped, then beeped again, the sound it makes when the chip is registered to someone else. She looked at the screen. She looked at me. She said my name. Corey smiled too wide. "We're co-parents," she announced, loud enough for the tent to hear. The rescue director stepped over with a calm that had moved mountains. "We don't change ownership without the registered owner's consent," she said. And, "Oh, hello," she bent to pet him. He flopped like a baked potato at her feet, purring hard enough to fog glass. "Let's check contact notes." Notes. I'd flagged him as stolen months ago and then canceled the report because I didn't want a scene. The director read that and raised an eyebrow just enough to say, "You were trying to be the bigger person. We can call this simple," she said. "We return him to the person on record." Corey laughed. Brittle. "He prefers my home." The director suggested something neither of us wanted but both of us needed. "Let the cat show us." She carried him to the edge of the tent and set him down. We stood 6 feet apart. The fair went quiet in our pocket of noise. He blinked at me, at Corey, at the table with the free treat samples, then made a decision with his whole stupid heart, bounded like a loaf taking legs, and launched up my chest. Corey said a word I won't print. The director nodded once, a judge tapping a gavel. "That's that," she said, and handed me a new tag with my phone and the rescue's hotline. "Also," she added, voice light, "our policy bans adopters who attempt to transfer ownership without permission from future adoptions." "Are you serious?" Corey snapped. "Gravely," the director said, and turned back to the line of people waiting with carriers and hopeful faces. I didn't post the video a stranger sent me later of the jump. I watched it alone with the cat sprawled across my lap like a bad decision I would make again. Karma wasn't dramatic. It was a beep, a note in a database, a director who knows that love is a homing signal you can hear in the bones. Story 15. When Mara dumped me, she said I lacked grit, and that her new boyfriend, Coach Theo, understood champion energy. He ran a running club that treated Saturday long runs like church. They wore matching singlets and called water hydration strategy. I went back to teaching 7th grade science and grading labs on osmosis. Theo signed up for the city marathon to promote his coaching app. He posted daily reels about negative splits and kicking doubt in the teeth. The race partnered with a children's hospital. Every mile raised money for kids like one of my students, Jalen, who needed a bone marrow transplant. Our class made posters and practiced cheering. Jalen's mom cried when I told her we'd be at mile 23. Race day, cracked open, beautiful. Cold air. Sun, like a promise. My students rang cowbells with the fury of planets. Theo's crew blasted past early, all teeth and cadence. He hit the half in a time that would qualify him for Boston. A miracle for a man whose long runs were mostly photo shoots. At mile 23, runners stop being beautiful and start being brave. Theo floated by. And then, 5 minutes later, he floated by again. Same relaxed face, same fresh stride, same coach grin at the camera on a bike pacing him for content. My colleague, who ran marathons in college, frowned. "His splits don't make sense," she said. "He either died and resurrected or he found a train." On the finish line jumbotron, the leaderboard put Theo in 3rd. He mounted the podium and raised his arms to a chorus of brand reps. The race director stepped up with a certificate. Then a volunteer whispered in her ear and handed over a phone. She looked, then nodded once, the way people do when a math problem has only one answer. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into the mic, "we have a timing irregularity under review." She gestured to the bib mats in the replay. Chips register at every 5K mat. Theo's chip blinked at 5K, 10K, and then nothing until 35K, with his GPS watch auto-upload showing a straight-line jump over neighborhoods whose streets curve. A transit line advocate on Twitter had already stitched footage from stations near mile 14 and mile 30. Theo, singlet on, jogging up the stairs. Theo tried to keep his arms up like he could hold the podium by force. The director took the medal from his hands gently. "Your donation still counts?" she said. "Your time doesn't." She turned to the mic again. "Per race policy, the 3rd place prize will be redirected to our partner charity." The Jumbotron displayed a name. Jalen M., age 12. The crowd roared the way crowds roar when they recognize the right direction of gravity. My students lost their minds. Jalen's mom covered her mouth and sobbed into both hands. Theo stepped off the podium like it was the edge of a cliff he'd finally seen. Afterward, my class crowded around Jalen in the park while the hospital rep handed them a giant check they'd never cash, but would remember forever. Mara stood at the back, sunglasses on, pretending to read her phone. She didn't come over. She didn't have to. She watched a city choose a kid over a brand and understood exactly where grit lives. Karma didn't tackle him at mile 23. It waited at the finish line with math, video, and a little boy's name in lights. And I didn't need revenge because the only podium I wanted that day was the one made of cardboard and crayons where my students held up their signs and yelled until their throats hurt. Story 16. My ex, Tessa, was a flight attendant who treated status like oxygen. When she left, she called me coach as an insult and joked that I'd never understand life at altitude. I went back to my economy seat and my earthbound job and tried not to track her life through the airplane selfies tagging cities she never actually saw. One Friday, a storm stacked delays over our airport like plates. I was flying home from a client site. Tessa's airline worked the route. At the gate, everyone was brittle and quiet. A man in a wheelchair asked about pre-boarding. The gate agent, young, exhausted, said they'd make an announcement. Tessa appeared with her crew, sunglasses on indoors, laughing with a pilot about wheelies clogging the jet bridge. She didn't notice me. I wished I hadn't heard. They boarded late. Tempers up. Over the PA, Tessa did her safety demo with the same influencer sing-song she used on Instagram. As we taxied, she forgot to mute the interphone. Her voice carried cabin-wide. If one more basic asked me to lift a bag, I swear. This metal tube is not CrossFit, a collective inhale. A mom in 17C turned and stared at the ceiling like she could send the sound back. The captain halted. Engines idled. A long minute. Then his voice. Calm, winter steady. Ladies and gentlemen, we're returning to the gate. Groans. Curses. We docked. Through the window, I watched an older woman in a navy pantsuit step onto the jet bridge with 2 security officers. She wore no badge but moved with a kind of quiet authority. The captain opened the forward door. The woman boarded, looked at Tessa, and said gently, "May we speak?" They stepped onto the bridge. The door closed. 2 minutes later, it opened again, and Tessa was gone. The woman took the interphone herself. "Good evening. I'm the COO. I was on this flight deadheading. I apologize for what you heard. That is not our standard." She turned to the man in the wheelchair in row 5. "Sir, you are welcome to deplane now and reboard first with a gate escort, or remain if you prefer. We will make room, and we will make time." The entire cabin exhaled like the plane had gained lift just from decency. We left 30 minutes late and landed to a flood of texts. Passengers had posted the hot mic audio. It went everywhere. Under a thread about rude FAs, the COO herself commented, "We've addressed this. Please remember most crew are extraordinary." This was not later. A union rep posted balanced, human words about burnout and standards. No pylon, just a clear line. I didn't DM Tessa or gloat. On my next flight, I saw the same captain. He recognized me from nothing and everyone. He helped a kid stow a trumpet without being asked. When I reached home, I watched Tessa's account go private and then go quiet. The last thing I saw, posted before the flight, was a caption: "Choose people who level you up." Karma did. It leveled her out of a job she'd begun to treat like a stage. And it leveled a plane full of strangers into a small community that made room for a man in his chair without anyone acting like it was a favor. Story 17. Maya dumped me at a coffee shop with the line, "You're a good editor, but a boring protagonist." She was polishing a debut novel she said would expose the patriarchy with lyric knives. I'd spent months reading drafts, tightening screws, suggesting a fix for a thorny middle section. After we broke up, she blocked me and sold the book in a 2-book deal. Friends told me to be proud. Pride felt like a splinter. At the book festival, I went to a panel because my sister's kid wanted a signed copy from one of the other authors. Maya sat center stage in a velvet blazer, radiating. It finally happened. Midway through, a moderator asked about influences and process. Maya leaned into the mic. "I write from the wound," she said. "Everything is original." The crowd murmured approvingly. Then the moderator said he wanted to try something new. A live craft demo. He'd asked a university librarian to show how scholars trace intertextuality using open-source tools. The librarian projected a side-by-side of Maya's pivotal chapter and a blog post from a tiny site I used to run when I thought the internet was a notebook. The blog had 10 readers and a comment from my mom. The tool highlighted unusual phrasings, a niche metaphor about a house learning its own echo, a cadence of 3-line paragraphs. The librarian spoke kindly. "Influence is normal. Citation is generous." Maya laughed a half-beat too late. "We all drink from the stream," she said. The librarian nodded. "Yes, and it's customary to thank the stream. He clicked again. The projection showed my old Google Doc revision history, public by accident, with tracked changes from a username that matched Maya's handle from years ago. She'd pasted whole passages into her draft with notes like, "Keep this? 2 on the nose?" The room didn't boo. It went very, very quiet. A lawyer from the publisher stood at the back, face suddenly made of math. The moderator, bless him, did not turn it into blood sport. He simply asked, "Would you like to speak to the question of acknowledgement?" Maya swallowed. She could have said, "I forgot," or "I'll fix it." She said, "Jealous exes lie." The librarian raised a hand. "For clarity, I pulled these from public caches. No one sent me anything." He closed his laptop gently, as if tucking a child. After the session, the publisher announced an erratum and update for future printings. My email pinged. They were adding an acknowledgement and offering compensation for the use of my lines. I said yes, but asked that a portion go to the small press that had given me my first rejection with a handwritten note. Months later, I found a revised edition in a bookstore. The acknowledgement read, "To the person who taught me that original doesn't mean alone." It didn't name me. It didn't have to. My sister asked if I felt avenged. I said no. I felt correctly shelved. Karma hadn't ripped her book off the table. It had opened it to a page where credit finally sat, small and unglamorous and exactly right.